Okay, so I'm here to talk about forging productive national discourse online with React. And this is, they told me 20 minutes, I have to leave time for questions, so this is really condensed. I'm David Fridley. I'm part of a nonprofit called NCIV, and this is open source software. The tool is called, or the repo is called Civil Pursuit. And we're just diving in. But I want to say I am so happy to have in-person meetups again. And I want to thank Edge and everybody for putting this together. It is just great to have in person. So all right, so let's start with the problem. And I'm gonna kill you a little bit with PowerPoints, but not too much. We live in a polarized echo chamber. With the way that social media works and even the news media, we have basically the blues are talking to the blues and the reds are talking to the reds, and the reds are saying not so great things about blues, and the blues are saying things that piss off the reds, but they don't hear each other because we live in a polarized echo chamber. And I want to tell you that in person, dialogue and deliberation works. This is like a social science. They get people together, take a big room full of people, and they can lead them through productive discussions about things they disagree on. And in the end, they understand each other better, they get along, nobody kills each other, and sometimes they even find awesome agreements. And so I'm going to, I guess, take you through some of the steps of one of the very simple discussion formats that they have in dialogue and deliberation. And then I'm going to show you how that turns into code and React. And I'm also going to talk a lot about Storybook today, which has been really instrumental in making this work. So take your room full of people and break them up into small tables. Now, some people will say 8 or 6 or whatever. I like 10 because that makes the math easy, but it's really just a variable. And the first step in this is, we start with a question, what's the biggest problem in this country? And we ask everyone to write your answer down first. Don't listen to what other people have to say, just write down your answer. And then we have a step of discussing an answer, discussing answers and putting them into groups. What are the similar answers? Some people might say healthcare, somebody else might say medical care, but it's really the same category. And they're all doing this in person on, around tables, and these are supposed to look like Post-its, by the way. And then the next step would be to rank the answers. What's most important for the whole world to consider, and what's least important, as far as you're concerned. All right, and everybody does this sort of individually. And now online, you see a lot of tools where it's like, oh, you can sort them. You can have number 10 and number 9 and number 8. Well, that is a higher cognitive load than saying, well, what's most important and what's least important and what's everything else. So in person, they do it like this. They don't ask you to sort it by 1 through 10. And then the next step is, around the table, and this is, we'll get into this more, but it's now discussion time. So there's a question like, what's the most important topics for the table to report out to the rest of the community? And so they'll go around and they'll say what they think is important, and they'll say why. And it's also a good discussion when you're getting other people to say, well, why that's less important, and maybe something else is more important. But there's this discussion step where everybody is expressing what they think. Productively. And then the next round in this discussion, and the last round in the in-person discussion, would be to rank things again. Now that you've talked about these issues and had your discussion, again, what do you think is the most neutral and least? And surprisingly or not surprisingly, we see convergence. When people do this, they converge on similar things. All right, then what we're doing, because we're online and not in person, we're adding this tournament process where we can invite 1,000, 10,000 people to our discussion, and have them go through this discussion process. And then we can take the top 10% of answers from that round and feed them into round 2, where people consider 10 at random of those 1,000 answers. And then round 3, consider those in round 4 and basically converging into one answer. And the other anecdotal thing about in-person dialogue and deliberation is that sometimes somebody figures it out, how to tie it all together, and you end up with something that 80% or 90% of people agree on. It's not like 51-49. It's like we're looking for the big agreements. All right, so now let's jump to how we make that work. And so we took all this and we worked with a designer and we created a Figma layout for all of this, for working with the cards and everything. I certainly don't have time to go through all the Figma, but I want to take you to what we did for the discussion. And so here's the discussion step where we ask everybody, well, why do you think that's most important? So for the things that you thought were most important, just say why you thought it was most important, and also why you thought it was least important. All right? And then we have another step where we show you what everybody said and sort of the side-by-side comparison about why it's important and not. And you can basically pick on the one that you think is the best argument for why it's important, and also the best argument for why it's least important. Now, what I've learned is that you're working with a designer. I mean, it took a few weeks to do this with the designer, and then we turned it into a bunch of GitHub repo issues for different volunteers to work on. And one designer and a few weeks of work can generate lots and lots of weeks of work for coders. So I'm just going to dive into this one issue that was created for the point component. The point component is basically that card, the representative for that card that you see. And so we just take that and break it down. Here's the props that go into the component. This is a screen grab out of Figma. Here's the link to the Figma for this particular component. This was a more complicated component, so it's got more details. But this is all the stuff that was given to one of the volunteers to build this component.
Can you make it a little bigger?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and this is all on GitHub, so you can go look at it later. And again, we're rushing through things. And anyway, and this is the code. This is the React code for building that component, just the point component. And as we sort of work on the code, we include links to the issues that were worked for this, so that you can refer back to it if you ever come here and have to work on it again. And this is just a simple React component. Well, a little bit more complicated than simple. Also, we're doing React JSS, so we have all the CSS styles in here. And the thing that really makes this work with a volunteer, a volunteer developer community is that we're asking volunteers to create the component, but also create the storybook that goes with the component to test it out. How many people have heard of Storybook? All right, yay. Okay, and for the rest of you, it's a surprise, right? Great. You're learning something new. So the advantage of Storybook is that as you're building this React component, you build the sort of the test case for this as you go. And it makes it really easy in real time to build the component. It's evolving on the screen as you save the code. And you can sort of recreate your test cases over and over again really quickly. And so here's like one case for the point component. Here's the selected case. Here's the disabled case. Here's the case with a lead button in it. There were a lot of cases. This was sort of, this is the kitchen sink component. And so I want to show you what a story looks like. It's basically import the point, which this is the component that you build. And skip this because this was input into one of the tests. But the basic format for Storybook is export this object, which says this test, this file is testing the point component. These are default args to pass to every test for this component. And then here's that we had that primary default case. So we're writing a test case. It's called primary default. We're passing in this arg called visual or vstate, visual state, and that's it. And then it just renders like this on the screen, and you've got it all going. And I want to show you one other case. This is the button component. And you can also use this play function to interact with the test. So this is testing that somebody has clicked on the button and that you're getting the right response. So you basically, in this play, you pull in the canvas, you simulate a user click, and you look for the result, and then you check the result to make sure it's what you want. So this is all done for each component, one component at a time. And then when you get to the end, we've been building components, and we build higher level components on top of the lower level components. And here we're to the point where we're pretty much starting to integrate everything into the full application. So I talked to you about the steps. So the first step was to basically answer the question. And this is all running on the browser. The server side is something else that can run separately. Obviously you want them to run together at some point, but this is so great for building this and testing it, and dividing the work up among a lot of developers. And so here is the case for grouping points together. And you can see it's sort of got my previous data already in there, but you can group the points. And then after you're done grouping, did I group the points? All right, let's reset this for a second. All right. Of course, it's a live presentation, so the demo might not work, right? All right, here's all the points. And so I was talking about the grouping step. And this is why React is great. This isn't a form. This is like an interactive exchange. And so we're grouping these things. I'm saying this is the one that goes on top. And then we're done. And then we go to the next step. And this is the ranking step. So you're sitting around and you're looking at all these issues and you're saying, I think these are most important and neutral. I missed the most. There we go. All right. And so now you can go to the next step. And so this is that why is it most important part that we were talking about. And then why is it least important. All right. And so here is the discussion part where you're basically listening to the people around the table. But here we're saying these are what people said. Pick what you think is the best argument for why it's most important and why it's least important. All right, and down here, what's the best argument? All right. Okay, it's not, I got to show you this, that was great. It's not letting me go to the next step. I don't know why. But such is the life of trying to do live demos. But in the end, what I want you to get out of this is that we can make online discourse productive. We just have to build that, rather than build what we've got with, trying to make money. So we've got to build it that way, and it's not going to be a for-profit thing. That's why NCIV is a nonprofit, and React has been awesome for being able to make all these components and make all this interactive. And Storybook has been great for, I mean, not just testing it, but being able to divide all this work up and have lots of different volunteers work on it and piece it together and have something to go. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. I don't know how I'm doing on time, so you can tell me how many questions there are yet to be.
Everyone give David a hand. Thank you. Go ahead and raise your hand if you have any questions.
So you mentioned you can have 1,000 online. What procedures do you have in place to prevent bots from being 900 of those 1,000?
At this point, by being really small. But we do have sort of a login and creating an account space, and we'd like to get to somewhere where we can do verification. And one of the things that we actually want to do is verify your actual physical address, because we also want to know how many people are in each state, and we can do, and we can do similar discussions for like what's the most important problem in the state, or what questions do you want to ask your mayor. So the location, what's your address information is relevant, but definitely it's a concern. We're going to have to address it. But right now our biggest risk is, proving that we can get 1,000 people.
For your concern about identifying who's in which state, you can use geolocation to say where they're coming from. VPNs and other things can mask that, and cell phones will misreport, but that'll get you a first order approximation.
Okay. Well, and we can also, there's the Google has the government information database. I forget what it is. So you can take somebody's address and look it up and find out what political districts they're in for voting and things. So I want to use sort of a combination of all that. If you say this is your address, are you at that address at least sometime? And but yeah, it's a problem, and it's something we're going to have to work with. Anything else?
Any more questions?
I think that's good for time. So again,
Okay.
thank you, David.
All right. Thank you.